Archibald Wainwright pressed his way up the stones of Caldwin Boulevard, past the crowd and their shouted slogans. For once, it wasn't a mob of his own making. He was almost jealous. "Bring back the Abbey! Reform, don't remove!" they chanted. Empress Emily's decision to dissolve the Abbey of the Everyman after the entire oracular order went mad had its supporters as well as its detractors. But the latter were more often younger folk whose memories of the overseers weren't tainted by the violent repressions of the rat plague, and none from Serkonos, where they had until recently continued unabated. Wainwright's own memories were of his greedy slumlord father sending the masked militants to interview tenants late on rent for some invented heretical allegation. Those quashed any inclination he might have toward joining the demonstration demanding the return of the powerful institution. Instead, he continued up toward Dunwall Tower, intent on his purpose even as the ever-present grey skies and wind gusts coming off the Wrenhaven River tried to push him back. It was the hour of open court, the one time any citizen could enter the royal palace and petition the Empress for an audience. He'd done so many times, and only occasionally received one. But he kept trying. The City Watch guards gave him sidelong glances or sneers of contempt as he entered, for they'd seen him before, knew his reputation as a populist firebrand. But he'd endured worse. Far worse. As he rode the tower elevator up to the throne room, several idle thoughts passed through his head. One was, not for the first time, how odd it was to put a throne room on the roof of a palace. He supposed it was a security measure, but then how to explain the briefly successful coup by Delilah Copperspoon barely a year ago? For that matter, how had those famous clockwork soldiers he'd heard so much about gotten up there, since there was no way they'd fit in the elevator now crowded by only himself and the beefy watch guard? He supposed these questions would have to wait for another time, as his business was of more important matters. The elevator door opened, and a line of more guards herded the day's petitioners across the rooftop courtyard and into the throne room. Ushered into the cavernous space that had once been Lord Regent Hiram Burroughs' safe room, Wainwright paused to let his eyes adjust to the dimness. Perhaps an intentional choice to put any attackers off balance, he thought. The room was crammed with petitioners, some rich and noble, others poor and desperate, and each lined up in turn to make their case to the Empress. Emily sat on her padded throne, slouched to one side with a sword propped under one hand. She affected an air of boredom which not too long ago would have been genuine, but Wainwright knew better. When you're weak, appear strong, and when you're strong, appear weak, the old Tivian maxim went. He knew she wasn't weak. He just hoped she'd grown wise as well as strong over the past year's troubles. While he waited his turn, Wainwright scanned the room for Corvo Otano, the ornery Lord Protector, Royal Spymaster, and whatever other offices Emily had adorned her father with. Once he'd threatened Wainwright for not addressing Emily with sufficient respect, but now he was nowhere to be seen, though that certainly didn't mean he wasn't about, watching. It was said age had finally begun to catch up with him after being wounded in the clock tower explosion, but Wainwright knew not to trust rumors. When the day grew long and orange light bathed the throne room, Wainwright finally reached the front of the line. Emily's eyes settled on his. She squinted ruefully and suddenly rose from her seat. "That's all for today," she declared in a tone that would brook no argument. After a few disappointed groans from those remaining few, she held up a hand wrapped in a dark cloth band which she was never seen in public without. "You can leave your petitions with the clerk, or take a ticket to be seen first on the next audience day, which is—" She glanced to her right where a well-dressed attendant stood holding a clipboard. 4 days from now, Majesty. 4 days. With that, she stepped from the dais and turned towards the door to the private royal chambers. "But wait!" Wainwright shouted, without thinking. "Pipe down," grunted an armored watchguard. "You heard the Empress." "But I was told—" "I don't give a plague rat's ass what you was told. Now stand over there." He jerked a massive thumb toward an empty corner of the room. "Excuse me?" Wainwright felt the old indignation rise in a hot wave from the pit of his stomach. The indignation that had led him to call for the abolition of the monarchy and replace it with a democratic government until only recently. "I have no intention of—" "You're that talker, ain't ya? Fella likes to whip people up, make 'em riot, yeah? You best learn to talk less and listen more if you know what's good for you. Now," the guard ordered, hand on his long sword, "go stand over there." Too furious to form a cogent retort, Wainwright folded his arms and stomped over to the space, a frown to curdle milk on his lips. A few nobles who'd known him in previous days tossed him smug smiles as they filed out. When the throne room was emptied of petitioners, the guard took Wainwright by the shoulder and shoved him toward the door. No, not the outer door, but the smaller one, the door into the royal apartments. What was this? Were they skipping taking him to Coleridge Prison and going right to the torturer's chamber? But no, there'd been no torturer for years. What then? To his utter shock, he was led up through the private rooms, up a stair, and into an office. A finely decorated office with a view of the river and docks below. At the end of the office was a desk in a state of utter chaos, papers and pens and dirty dishes scattered all about. And behind that desk... "Empress!" Wainwright exclaimed. "Nothing gets by you, does it, Wainwright?" Emily said with a sigh as she attacked a document of some kind with a pen. "That'll be all, Corporal, thank you. You can go back to your duties." The guard snapped a smart salute and left the room, closing the door behind him. Still dumbfounded, Wainwright said nothing while Emily tossed her pen aside in disgust and rose to regard him. "Well, Archibald, I'm rapidly running out of sides for you to be a thorn in. I thought I'd do us both a favor and let you stick this one in private." He raised an eyebrow. "That's a dramatic way of putting it, Majesty. Not that I'm going to complain about a private audience, but I'm a petitioner just like everyone else." "Like everyone else?" "Everyone else hasn't called to overthrow me. I'd hoped you'd had a change of heart on that score." Wainwright grunted. "If you're referring to that incident with Luella Price, remember I was duped. They used me." "You were easy to use." "And your Majesty dealt with her handily, if I recall. And I've been on my best behavior ever since." "Oh? Then what's this mob you've been leading down at the steel mill?" Wainwright shook his head. "Hardly a mob. It was a rally. For fair safety standards for the workers, that's all. Just because I'm not pushing to dethrone you doesn't mean I've abandoned my fight for labor rights. That's what my petition's about." "Yes," said Emily, rifling through her papers. "I have a copy here already. Somewhere. This Works Council, is it?" "Workers' Council, yes. A body of men and women with some dirt under their fingernails to make sure any project in the rebuilding of Dunwall includes common-sense safety rules and fair working conditions." Emily rolled her eyes. "Wonderful. More bureaucrats for me to deal with." In spite of himself, Wainwright laughed. "Well, Empress, if you prefer you can cut right to the source of matters. Give the Commons some direct representation in Parliament." Emily looked up from the shrine to disorder that was her desk, eyes wide and aghast. "Are you insane? They'd cut off both our heads if I even suggested that." "Half the nobility already wants to, thanks to the whale oil rationing." Wainwright shrugged. "The whales grow ever more scarce, that's plain as day. They can't blame you." Emily let out a wry guffaw. "It continues to amaze me what they can do when their precious profits demand it. In Karnaca I saw wind turbines powering half the city. We don't have mountain gusts here, but the winds off the Wrenhaven are strong enough to bend trees backward. We can use at least some of that. I want to build some windmills here, in Dunwall." "Then you make my point for me. Another construction project that'll require workers to risk their lives. They need someone looking out for them. The Caldwin family's still influential, even if half the nobility wants to cut your head off. The Caldwin family was offered the throne by Parliament. My grandfather became emperor as a compromise because there simply was no other practical choice. If they decide to change their minds, others have tried," Wainwright snapped. "Twice. They failed. Twice." Remembering himself, he took a step backward, cleared his throat. Beg pardon, Majesty. I guess I spoke out of turn." "Yes, you did. People often do that when they're passionate about something, and they're less likely to lie to me when they're doing it." She stepped out from behind the desk, went over to a painting depicting an old pub lit by golden lamps at night. "Make no mistake, Wainwright. I've seen up close what the common people endure every day, more than once. But we have to be practical. Seats in Parliament is out of the question, but I will present your Workers' Council idea. Of course, my advisors will have to approve the details, and the next parliamentary session isn't until the month of harvest." Wainwright scowled. "More committees, more delay. Welcome to my world. I suppose that'll have to do for now." "Thank you, Majesty." He fought to keep the hint of sarcasm out of his voice, and only partly succeeded. "I guess I've taken up enough of your time. I'll not trouble you any longer today." Emily laughed, a sound too often these days reserved only for those closest to her. "Are you kidding? I'd much rather lock horns with you than read another damned report. Or analysis of the report, or summary of the analysis of the report. It never ends." Seeing a rare opportunity to forge a rapport with the most powerful person in the Isles, Wainwright ventured some boldness. "What is it this time, if I may ask?" "Oh, the Tivian Trade Commission, as usual," she said with a wave. "Every one of their proposals has 30 subsections, subclauses, addendums. Addenda? Whatever. At least we seem to have come to an agreement on tariffs, so the embargo on white-leaf tobacco can finally be lifted. The hookah shops will be glad of that. Do you know, there are some fools that believe it's forbidden in Bristol because they think it'll make them loopy like haberweed. They're going to be disappointed. Especially with all the nightmares everyone's been having ever since these rifts or whatever they are appeared. Right. Another crisis for me to deal with. Anyway, I'll see about your workers' council. But as a matter of courtesy, do let me know if you've a mind to overthrow me again. I might just help you do it, depending on my mood. Wainwright smiled, knowing full well she wasn't serious. I will consider it, Empress. But no promises. Wainwright left the office barely able to contain his excitement. What luck! To present his idea to the Empress in private without those noble gawkers turning their noses up at him, always disapproving. And to find her in such a receptive mood. He was about to leave the royal apartments when a hand lanced out of a dark hallway and dragged him to the side. Before he could yell for help, another hand clapped over his mouth. "Shush," growled a whispered voice, though how a whisper could growl he didn't know. "Keep your head, Wainwright, if you want to keep your head." Corvo Atano. He couldn't forget that voice if he tried. The hand relaxed. "Stay quiet. Enjoy your audience with the Empress, did you? Not that you deserve it, but it seemed the best way to get you up here without raising suspicions." Wainwright turned around, equally outraged and terrified. You arranged this?" "That's right. You can thank me later." "Well, you got me, Lord Protector. What do you want with me?" "Come." Corvo shoved Wainwright down the hallway to what looked like a washroom. The low light revealed an aged man sat upon a newly installed flushing toilet. He'd seen a few of those in recent years, but they remained relatively rare. Fortunately, its current occupant still had his breeches up and was just sitting, waiting. Who? Corvo grabbed a candelabra and drew it nearer. The old man's mutton chops and scars looked familiar, but Wainwright couldn't immediately place him. "Bit unusual place for a meeting," Corvo said, "but I doubt anyone will think to snoop on us here." The old man laughed. "Corvo, every year you think more and more like a gangster, which warms my old heart." "This is the one I told you about, Archibald Wainwright, troublemaker and rabble-rouser extraordinaire." "Then I'm honored to know ya." The old man grabbed Wainwright's hand and shook it heartily. "This is Zarya Fillmore," said Corvo, "a foreign liqueur importer." Wainwright regarded the man more closely. "No," he said at last. "No, I know you. I've seen the posters. I may have been born an aristocrat, but I've dealt in the real world long enough to know who you are, or were. Still, if that's the name you choose now, so be it. Why am I here?" The man who had once been the gang boss, Slackjaw, nodded. "All right, to it then. It's known to me your father was a friend to the late unlimited Lord Estamont, yeah?" "Friend is putting it overly generous, but it'll do, sure." "It's also known to me that you had a passing acquaintance with his nephew, one Lemuel Estamont." "True enough. A lifetime ago, it seems, before I renounced my seat in Parliament. We haven't spoken since. What of it?" "If you know who I am, you know I still like to keep my ear to the ground, or in this case to the hole in the wall. Some of my clients frequent the Dunwall Shooting Club. I often do business there. Whilst awaiting some customers, I happen to overhear quite the extraordinary conversation. It seems Lemuel has struck up some kind of deal with a former overseer. Didn't get his name, but the fellow seems to hold a grudge against the Abbey, even though it's gone. Not to mention against the whole world once he gets a few drinks in him. None of which is unusual in any sense, mind you, but his manner of expressing it did give me some pause." "I don't understand," said Wainwright. "Apparently," continued Corvo, "this overseer came into contact with a very interesting person. A woman whose arm looked to be made out of the void itself, and an eye made of red crystallized evil. His words. He said she was drinking at the Black Pony pub just down the street, not particularly enjoying that gin cocktail they make, but drinking to forget something awful. I have some idea of who this person might be, but I'm not sure." "After this overseer bought her another drink," said Fillmore, "she claimed to have ended the outsider's very existence." "What?" Wainwright took a step back, incredulous, and bumped into the wall behind him. "This is why I'm here? To listen to the ramblings of a drunken—" "As I said," Corvo insisted, "I have reason to suspect who this is, and I'd trust her. Don't ask me for details, you wouldn't believe it anyway. But if I'm right, this is the reason for all these rifts that have been opening all over the Isles, and the nightmares people are having." "This is crazy," said Wainwright. "I came here to ask for a workers' council, not to babble about occult gobbledygook." "There's more," said Fillmore. "After the overseer told his story to Estamont, he whispered something in his ear I couldn't hear. Estamont turned positively white. Looked like he was about to throw up the fancy ox-tongue aspic he'd ate for lunch. The overseer said, 'This is my chance at last. I can avenge her, avenge myself on them all. But I need your help to get there fast enough. When it's done, I'll set all accounts to rights.' I knew then that only Corvo could deal with this." "But what does all that mean?" "We don't know," said Corvo. "That's where you come in. You were friends with Estamont. You could find out. That's why I brought you here." "Me?" "Talk to him. Try to figure out what this overseer's game is and how Estamont can help him. If he means to meddle in affairs of the void, it could make what's happening all the worse. You really believe in this superstitious nonsense?" "I wish it were nonsense, but it's not. The outsider is real. Or was. If he's really gone, it throws everything into question. And I don't like unanswered questions." Wainwright bristled. "Why should I help you? I happen to know you once threatened to send me to the bottom of the Wrenhaven." Corvo's nostrils flared. "You spoke against your rightful empress, my daughter." "Oh, come on. If the last 16 years has taught us anything, it's that rightful is just mightful in the pretty dress. You come from peasant stock, you must understand. The people are asking for some small measure of control over their own lives. That is not an unreasonable request. Maybe you don't care, though. After all, you're a lord now, right? You can afford to spit on folk like you used to be. Call them rabble. Folk like your parents." Corvo grabbed Wainwright and shoved him hard against the wall. "Don't you ever speak of my parents again. You don't know anything." "Gentlemen," said Fillmore. "Surely this is a debate for another day." "Ah, touched a nerve, I see," said Wainwright. "Very well, Lord Protector. I apologize. But tell me true. Why should I help you?" Corvo let go of Wainwright, smoothed the folds of his shirt and waistcoat. "Because do this for me and I'll see you get your workers' council." "You can deliver Parliament?" "I have my resources, yes." "Deal," Wainwright said. "I'll do what I can. But as I told the Empress, no promises." Wainwright walked the streets of the estate district, his spine tingling with every step. He hadn't been here in years, and he was sure he'd be tossed into Serpentine Canal any minute by some light blue uniformed watch officer guarding the aristocrats. The Estermont Manor lay near to the Boyle mansion, so close that rumors persisted about tunnels dug between them so the highborns could jump into each other's beds with ease but without unwanted attention. Lemuel had claimed he'd lost his Jerry to two of the Boyle women at once, but Wainwright rather doubted that story. To Wainwright's surprise, Lemuel had agreed to see him now, after so many years. Pounding the front doors with a heavy bronze knocker in the shape of a blood ox, he was surprised again when Lemuel answered it personally. Not a servant in sight. "Archie!" Despite Wainwright's renunciation of an easy life of wealth, the years seemed to have been kinder to him than Estermont. The man was worn thin and haggard, his fine clothes threadbare and in need of a tailor. Still, he smiled at the sight of his old friend. "So good to see you. Come in, come in." He fairly dragged Wainwright through the big double doors and into the dark of the manor's foyer. Only a few candles burned, and those almost expended. "Thanks for seeing me, Lem," Wainwright said haltingly. "We, didn't exactly part on the happiest of terms." Lemuel waved the past away. "Long forgotten. I can't even recall the whys and wherefores." A lie, but a polite one, Wainwright supposed. He wasn't exactly here with the most honest of intentions himself, after all. "Glad to hear it. How have you been?" Estermont sighed. "To tell the truth, things have been better. The family never recovered after my uncle died. I just don't have his talent for ruthless business. We've had to sell off half the manor just to keep the other half. My hagfish-brained cousin Talmadge backed Ramsay during the coup, and now he's lost everything. All we have left are our 5 votes in Parliament." Estermont reached for a decanter of brandy and 2 glasses set on a table in the foyer. "That's 5 more than I have," Wainwright rejoined with a smile he hoped looked friendly. "Yes, that's right." Estermont handed Wainwright a glass and led him into the manor's dim main hall. "You gave it all up to go slumming with the great unwashed." He laughed bitterly. "You and your eccentric hobbies. And yet you're faring better than I. Ironic, isn't it?" Wainwright had learned to hold his tongue in the face of such talk, especially around aristocrats he needed something from, so he maintained his smile. "Slumming? Yeah, I suppose. But I haven't fallen so far that I need to make deals with zealots. What's this I hear about you conniving with some ex-overseer?" Estermont winced. Heard about that, did you? Not much, but tongues wag. Lem, if you need help, you could have come to me. I might not be rich anymore, but I still have some pull in certain circles. And I haven't forgotten where I come from, either. That part was true enough, at least, even if he didn't mean it in the way he'd implied. I barely believe it myself, Archie, but I'm down to my last roll of the dice. That overseer, Berthold's his name, claims... Well, he claims something incredible. And if I help him with his plans, the reward puts my family back at the top, and more besides. Wainwright sat them down on a divan at the end of the hall. It creaked with age as the once rich upholstery stretched. Tell me. All right, but you can't repeat it. I'd be hauled off to Coldridge, or worse, a basement cell at the Ademeyer Institute. You have my word, Wainwright answered, perhaps a little too quickly. He felt sick knowing he'd almost certainly have to break it. Small price to pay for the Workers' Council, he thought. Estermont took a long gulp of his brandy. You see, this Berthold had a sister who was not once but twice accused of witchcraft by the Abbey. That's nothing special. They accuse everyone. Or they used to. Well, this one eventually stuck. They executed her, but not all at once. They tortured her with one of those infernal contraptions, those music boxes. Music, they call it. Then they dissected her, to examine the corruption of her flesh wrought by the influences of the outsider. Spirits guide me, but they made him watch. Part of his penance for trying to protect her, he said. That was just a couple years ago. He's been plotting his revenge, but the Empress disbanded the Abbey, threw his plans into chaos. Then, a month or so ago, he chanced to meet someone who claimed to have eliminated the outsider. Actually went into the void somehow and destroyed him. Some strange woman dripping with black magic. Her wording was vague, and she wouldn't say exactly what she'd done, but her abilities convinced him of the truth of it. She said it was the outsider's absence that's been causing all these anomalies all over the Isles. It sounded ludicrous to Wainwright, just as it had coming from Corvo, but no one could deny the strange phenomena plaguing the Empire. But what does this have to do with you, Lem? Well, Berthold seems to believe he can access the void through one of these rifts. He won't say precisely what he's planning, but he still wants revenge on what's left of the Abbey, on its former leaders, on everyone, it seems. He's stolen all manner of heretical artifacts from the Abbey's archives that he thinks will let him access the void's power for his own uses. He promises that in exchange for funding the acquisition of several more pieces, and an expedition to one of these rifts, he'll use whatever power he gains to restore the wealth and influence of the Estermonts again. Think of it. A fast ship, some supplies, and occult gewgaws, a pittance next to what we could gain. And you really believe all this? I've little choice left, Archie. It's this or bust. I've had to channel the funds through my Boyle Industries accounts to keep it quiet, else I'd be ruined. Or laughed out of Bristol, which adds up to the same thing. Oh, I've burned to tell someone of this. You've no idea what a load off my mind this is. But you cannot tell anyone, understand? Not yet. I understand. Maybe I can help. I know a few back channels my father once used to hide questionable money. Oh, thank you, Archie, thank you. Here, have some more brandy, and let's talk of more pleasant things. Do you remember when we convinced Celia Pendleton to show us her... Oh, I remember. And then we... Wainwright returned home to his modest apartment in the tailor's district only slightly drunk. Estermont could always hold his liquor better, but what he told him kept him fairly sober. The next day Wainwright went to the Boyle Company office. Although he worked for the good of the commons now, he still maintained enough of his family's investments to draw on funds for certain unexpected needs. A coin of 50 quietly pressed into a clerk's palm bought him a good half-hour alone with the firm's financial records, no questions asked. He soon found what he was looking for. Lemuel Estermont's accounts, and the money he'd bounced around different shell companies to divert it to his new friend, Berthold. A lot of money, indeed almost enough for a fast ship to anywhere in the Isles, along with all the supplies and crew one could wish for. He scrawled down copies of the important pieces of information, then made a discreet exit through the back door of the building. Over the next few days he did as he said and helped Estermont move more of his money, gaining his trust in the process. He also sent a note to Corvo reporting that he'd made progress, but said nothing more than that. Soon it was all done and dusted. Estermont invited Wainwright to a dock just upriver from Caldwin's Bridge, where he found a ship berthed. Antonia Aquila II was painted proudly on its port-side bow, and Estermont beamed equally proudly as he bounded down the gangplank to embrace Wainwright. Archie,
I wanted you to see what you've helped me do. Beautiful ship, isn't she? And I wanted you to meet my partner. Here it comes now."
As workers loaded the ship with crates of supplies, water, and whale oil, an older, bald man came plodding down the plank with a dour frown. He wore an old gray jacket that had just enough threads removed to conceal the fact that it had once been a warfare overseer's uniform. He eyed Wainwright suspiciously.
"And just who are you?"
Estermont spread his hands in a placating gesture.
"Bert, I told you about my friend Archie, who's been helping me arrange this expedition. We owe him a debt of thanks."
Berthold inclined his head just a bit, still suspicious.
Right.
"This is quite a ship you've chartered," Wainwright said. "A steamer, right?"
"We'll need it to get where we're going in time," Berthold almost snarled.
"Which is?"
"Which is more than you need to know. When this is over, you'll all be richly rewarded for helping me— Ho, you there!"
Berthold jabbed a finger at a laborer who'd fumbled with a heavy crate going up the gangplank.
"Careful, or I'll have your hide whipped raw. So hard to get good help these days."
"You'll be shoving off soon then, yes?" Wainwright ventured to ask.
"As soon as we're packed. The quicker the better."
Estermont turned to Wainwright.
"See, all's taken care of. Our part's done. All that remains is to wait. Why not come stay at the manor for a few days? I'm sure we could convince Celia to visit."
Wainwright eyed the ship, not at all tempted to return to his old days of aristocratic idleness. That sounds delightful. But there are a few errands I need to take care of first. Catch up with you later?" Estermont clapped him on the shoulder.
"Capital! Until then, my friend."
After Estermont climbed into his street carriage and rode off, Wainwright followed the line of workmen loading the last of the ship's cargo from a nearby warehouse. He entered it just in time to see the final crate being hefted by a strong, blond Morlian. An impulse seized him, and before he had a chance to talk himself out of it, he said to the man, "Hey, I'll get this one. You can knock off a bit early." The worker shrugged. "Won't say no to that, buddy." When Wainwright was alone, he covered his clothes with a woolen dockworker's coat he'd snatched from a wall locker, donned a cap, and rubbed grease from a winch on his face in a simulacrum of a stubble. Thus disguised, he hoisted the final box, fighting to keep on his feet as it threatened to crush him under its weight. Straining and grunting, he wrestled the crate up the plank and onto the top deck. Berthold waited impatiently next to the captain, a green-eyed Tivian woman with an expression of permanent annoyance.
"Are we finally loaded?" she demanded.
Wainwright nodded curtly.
"Last one, Captain."
He pitched his voice in a gruff timbre to hide his identity, but Berthold wasn't paying attention, already retreating below.
Fine, then let's cast off. Stow the cables and mend the capstan. Look lively, you bull rats."
The crew jumped into action to prepare for launch, breaking into a rough rendition of Watery Grave to synchronize the pace of their work. Wainwright tried to look busy while searching for a place to hide. It wouldn't take long to figure out he wasn't part of the crew. "What in the void have I done?" he thought over and over again. This was well beyond what Corvo had tasked him with, yet something drove him on. In the darkness of the lower decks, Wainwright hid among the stevedores. The whale oil rationing had led some ships to include coal boilers, the latest innovation from Rosewine Industries. The men hired to shovel it grew so blackened they could be anyone. It was an unpopular enough task that an extra hand wouldn't draw any complaint. After the great groaning roar of Caldwin's bridge being raised to allow the ship's passage, it was another hour to open sea. For days, a week, longer, the ship traveled, driven by steam and wind when it was favorable. During all this, Wainwright didn't dare show his face outside the boiler room, hammock bunks, and mess hall, so he didn't know where they sailed, but the growing cold implied northward. They drove on at near flank speed most of the time. Was Berthold trying to reach a void rift before it collapsed? At last, the Antonia Aquila II reached some chilly port, and the endless shoveling of coal ceased. Caked with black dust, Wainwright went topside to get some fresh air and was greeted with a sharp wind and vast tracts of snow stretching away toward white-capped mountains. Tivia. "All right, you coal choffers," shouted the foreman. 5 hours leave, then it's back below. Don't be late and don't get shanked in town." Wainwright went ashore with the rest of the crew while local dockmen unloaded a small bit of the cargo. Berthold once again watched the work with an impatient gaze. And once again a clumsy worker stumbled with a crate, sending it crashing to the frozen ground. Wainwright only got a glance, but he could have sworn he saw a bone charm carved with arcane symbols fall out. Berthold spat a hail of curses at the worker, moving quickly to conceal the artifact. Their port of call, it turned out, was Tamarack. Snow piled against the buildings of the city, clogging the streets and slowing the team of horses Berthold had hired to haul 3 of his crates to some unknown destination. In the distance, a mine dug deep into the earth, the source of almost all the copper wire in the Isles. Lines of wagons hauled ore to the smelters, and Berthold's crew of 4 or 5 servants blended into this procession without drawing attention. Wainwright paused only to wash the worst of the coal dust from his face, revealing a week's worth of beard growth. He followed Berthold's progress from a distance, straining not to lose sight of him among the copper miners. But at some point the wagon holding the ex-overseer veered northward on a barely visible, frost-covered track that led into the mountains. "Shit," Wainwright whispered to himself. "Can't follow without being seen now." Waiting until Berthold was almost out of sight and over a low hill, Wainwright began to follow, and was yanked back by the collar of his coat. "Not so fast, rabble-rouser." Shocked, Wainwright spun about to face a grizzled, gray-bearded man almost devoured by overcoats and caps and gloves. It was a moment before he recognized who'd accosted him. "Lord Protector!" It was indeed. Corvo Attano appeared as if from nowhere, here in the frozen north. "Hush." Corvo drew Wainwright close. "No one knows I'm here, not even Emily. I'm sure Her Majesty would give me an earful for it." "But how?" "I had you followed. I know all about Westermont's financial tricks, and about Berthold. I actually met him once, long ago. If I'd known what that would lead to. I stowed away aboard the ship just before it launched, same as you. Good to know my stealth skills are still sharp. But it seems I'm not alone. You didn't have to do this, you know." "Humph," Wainwright grunted. "I'll do whatever it takes to get your support. So yes, I did. But Berthold's getting away while we dawdle." "No, he's not. My intelligence network's been keeping track of these void rifts. There's one just north of here. That's where he's going. And so am I. So are we. Don't tell me even the great Corvo Attano would turn down a hand against the void." Corvo looked at Wainwright blankly, glanced at the back of his left hand, and broke into a sudden low laugh. "Interesting choice of words. All right, Wainwright. But I have some experience in these matters, so you follow my lead." Now that they knew Berthold's destination, they followed at a safe distance. At last, after almost a day's travel, they came to the rift. It was as if a great wound had been ripped into the world. A wall of shimmering blue and silver cut through both land and sky, and a warbling sound that drilled into your skull. Flames of energy danced at its edges, a portal as big as a factory building. They saw it clearly, though still a mile off. Wainwright had to look away after only a few seconds. "Ah! It's like it's staring into my soul." Corvo scowled. "It's bigger than my reports claimed. I think it's growing, might even be moving around. Who knows where it'll be a week from now. No wonder Berthold was in a hurry to get to it." "There's a terrifying thought." Wainwright pointed to a few specks of darkness before the phenomenon. "There's Berthold with his servants. What are they doing?" Corvo took out a collapsible spyglass and peered ahead. "They're attaching bone charms to themselves. Defense against the maddening effects of the void, maybe. Oh. What?" "They're going through, into the rift." "Which means?" Wainwright already knew the answer to that, though. He shivered, and not just from the cold. "Which means we are too." "Into the void?" Corvo nodded. "Into the void. Wouldn't be my first time. Come, or don't." "I'll come. I've got to see this through." They watched Berthold and his retinue walk straight into the shimmering portal, disappearing in swarms of light and leaving the wagon and horses behind. Soon Wainwright and Corvo stood in the same spot, the rift towering over them. "What will we find on the other side?" asked Wainwright, fingers jammed in his ears in a futile attempt to block out the warbling. "Hard to say. It's different each time. Whatever it is won't be pleasant. Cold and loneliness like you've never known. But I have a feeling that whatever Berthold's plotting is much worse." Taking a breath, Corvo stepped forward and disappeared. Wainwright took several long breaths, shaking into the bargain. Okay, we can do this." Before he could let himself lose nerve, he followed. A flash of light, then a flash of dark. Darker than dark. Darker than nothingness. He dared open his eyes. He found himself on an ethereal, rocky pathway that seemed suspended in empty space. This is the void? Incredible. In the distance, objects floated and tumbled against a colorless sky. Some resembled buildings, others vehicles, and some he could swear were... Are those whales?" "Yeah," said Corvo next to him, though his voice also somehow sounded far away.
Don't ask how or why. I can't explain it. You're right. It feels colder even than Tivia. Cold, deep in my bones. Wainwright's legs quivered, and he dropped to one knee. Oh, I shouldn't be here. No one should be here. I've heard that before, said Corvo, pulling Wainwright to his feet. Come, we've got to find Berthold. Wherever this leads, they must be up ahead. They followed the road of floating stone, sometimes hopping gaps in it, sometimes clambering over piles of the substance. You say you've actually been here before? Yeah, said Corvo, but it feels different this time, like it's all about to fall apart. Can't say why, but it does. The Abbey taught us to fear the outsider, maybe rightly so. But from what I've read, he also acted as a kind of central pillar of the void, keeping it from collapsing into our world. If he really is gone, one way or another, that could explain these rifts. This could be what drove the oracular sisters mad. I think they tried to do the job themselves, and failed. They walked for what could have been minutes or centuries, for Wainwright had lost all sense of time. Once a whale swam close by, floating in space but also propelled by its fins somehow. It let out a mournful cry unmuffled by the waves of the ocean, and its song seared into his heart. At last they appeared to catch up to Berthold. They were nestled in a rocky alcove at the edge of the path, where a plinth of the void material jutted out like an altar. He and his attendants were laden not just with charms, but other strange supplies. Corvo and Wainwright hid behind a tangle of sharp void stone, watching. What are they doing now? Wainwright whispered. Not sure. Looks like some kind of ritual. There's always a ritual involved with these things. Berthold lay upon the plinth while one of the servants took a bottle from a small box. Another drew something long and sharp. At first Wainwright thought it one of those odd overseer swords made of dark Tivian steel. But upon looking more closely, that blade, it's made of this, whatever this stuff is. Wainwright rapped on the massive void stone they hid behind. What could that mean? Probably one of the artifacts you helped him get a hold of. But Oh no. Corvo's face grew somehow even more dark, more troubled. I know what he's doing now. Those aren't just servants. They're cultists. Void cultists. Berthold's trying to recreate the ritual that made the outsider thousands of years ago. He's trying to become the outsider. What? Is that even possible? No idea. From what I know, that's not the same knife, but it's similar. He might just be crazy, but he might not be. Either way, we've got to stop him. Corvo began to rise from his hiding spot, but Wainwright halted him. Wait, are you sure? You said the outsider was like some kind of pillar, anchor that stopped the void from crashing into our world. If Berthold wants to become him, or something like him, maybe we should let it happen. Corvo shook his head. No, the outsider granted his powers to whoever could amuse him, make some change in the world. That was bad enough, but Berthold's consumed with vengeance. I know what that's like. There was a time I thought revenge solved everything. I would have murdered the whole world to get what I wanted. He'd destroy not just the remains of the Abbey, but all of us in the process, and certainly wouldn't honor any agreement with some greedy lord like Estermont. No, if the Void needs a new god, it'll have to find one itself. Now, will you help me? All right, but how? He's surrounded by his followers. Corvo pulled a finely crafted pistol from the folds of his coat. I've beaten worse odds. Hold on. You were right before. You are master of stealth. I'll go first, get their attention. You come at 'em from the side. Corvo gave Wainwright a grin. Why, Master Wainwright, you're turning out to be a man of many talents. During all this, Berthold's cultist followers tied him to the plinth, bound his hands, and began chanting in a circle around him. The words were gibberish to Wainwright, all hard consonants and diphthongs. As he approached, he saw one take up a large circle of whalebone and scratch odd symbols onto its surface. Another held the bottle near Berthold's mouth, while yet another raised the outlandish blade. Two of the cultists had a triangular tattoo on their upper chests, and one seemed to be another former overseer, also dressed in a tattered uniform. Into all this Wainwright walked as casually as if he'd been strolling a Dunwall street. Good day, folks, though there doesn't seem to be much day or night in these parts, eh? They jumped in shock and turned to face him. Berthold squirmed on his altar, still tied down. You! How did you get here? You cannot dare to interfere, shouted one of the cultists. Up close, Wainwright could see the man's face had partially turned to stone. Our mission is sacred. That's just how the Abbey used to talk. And where are they now? We are not the Abbey, said another, a middle-aged woman in expensive Sarkonian clothes. Stop talking and untie me, you idiots! Berthold struggled to free himself while one of the cultists attacked Wainwright with a voidstone knife, but the strike was slow and he dodged it easily. Another got behind him and tried to strangle him, but at just that moment Corvo dashed out from somewhere and took the cultist down. Another drew a gun of his own, and while throwing a punch with one hand, Corvo raised his pistol with the other. The shot sent the cultists flying off the precipice and into the empty void. Meanwhile, Wainwright drove a fist into the spine of another, knocking the wind out of him and rendering the cultist helpless and gasping. Berthold finally freed himself and scrambled over to where the knife lay forgotten. He raised it to his own throat and shouted, "Stop!" Corvo, Wainwright, and the cultists who hadn't already run off froze. "Stop. You followed me here, so I guess you know what I aim to do. And I will! I'll finish the ritual myself and become all-powerful." Corvo glanced over at the altar, then back at Berthold. "Then do it." "Say what?" Wainwright blurted out, confused. "But go ahead," Corvo insisted. "Finish it, I dare you. But we both know you won't. I've studied records recovered from you cultists. I know someone who saw images of the ritual firsthand." He went over to the altar and snatched the bottle. "You need this, don't you? To be drugged. The ritual requires you to forget your own name, to be reborn to the void. That's what this is for. Without it, you'll just die here." "Wait," said Berthold, almost pleading now. "Stop. Just put that down. You don't know what you're doing." "Yes, I do." Corvo turned to the vast expanse behind him, drew his arm back. "No, stop! You can't!" Berthold dropped the knife and dove for Corvo just as he launched the bottle into the abyss. It went flying and kept going, spinning until it was only a speck on the endless horizon. "Please, no!" Berthold seemed about to hurl himself after it as well, but Corvo held him fast, then threw him to the ground. Suddenly their deadly occult enemy was just a sobbing old man on his knees. "No, no, no! I was going to put it all to rights. Elsa, I'm sorry. Forgive me." With the ritual ruined, the cultists broke and ran back towards the rift. One of them grabbed the knife as he fled. Wainwright made a brief effort to detain him, but Corvo waved a dismissive hand. "Let them go. They can't hurt anyone now." Wainwright and Corvo bound Berthold once more, this time under arrest. He didn't struggle, just continued weeping. "Berthold," said Corvo in a voice now grown strangely gentle, "I know what they did to Elsa, and what they did to you. I'm so sorry. But they're all gone now, and I can't let you take revenge on the world because of it. I know what it's like to lose someone you love before your eyes. I know. And I know this isn't the way to honor their memories. Come with me. It'll be all right." Wainwright took hold of Berthold's arm as they led him back toward the rift. "I must admit I'm surprised. I figured you'd just execute him for what he's done. More sympathy than I expected from the famous assassin." Corvo seemed about to say something rude in reply, but just shook his head. Then, "You could fill a book with all the people I've killed. I used to think there was some magic number of them. Pile the bodies high enough and eventually they'll stop coming for you. At some point, I guess even I have to think about trying something else." "It seems, Lord Protector, you are also a man of many talents." "And that's about all there is to tell," said Wainwright when he once again stood in Lemuel Estermont's manor hall. "Damn it all! Now I'm ruined, just like my idiot cousin. And you broke your word to me, Archie." "He didn't," said Corvo. "I followed him without telling him. I found out about your little plan on my own, so no blame on him. You understand why I couldn't let it succeed. All that power in the hands of someone who seeks it out. He'd have betrayed you, never doubt it. I know something about that."
"Oh, I suppose. But what about me? The Estermont family? If word of this gets out—"
"It won't," said Wainwright. "I gave you my word once and kept it, and now I will again. Give me your support in Parliament for the Workers' Council, and I'll keep my mouth shut." Estermont huffed.
"I suppose I have no choice. Very well."
"Then we all understand each other," said Corvo. "Now, if you'll pardon me, I have one strange report to write." "What'll happen to Berthold?" "He'll be a guest in Coldridge until his trial. But there's really no law to cover what he did, or tried to do. My guess is he'll be sent to Addermire until he comes to terms with what happened to him." "How long do you think that'll take?" I'll let you know when I do. The Lord Protector turned and walked out of the manor.
What an odd fellow, said Estermont. Well, it's all well and good for you, but I'm still on the edge of bankruptcy.
Wainwright rubbed his chin and thought.
Oh no, you're getting that look in your eyes. You're hatching something.
I am. Those 5 votes of yours, how much are they worth to you?
What do you mean?
Wainwright smiled. A week later, a riot erupted, but this one was in the halls of Parliament. Estermont used his privilege to call a special early session, and the Workers' Council bill passed by 1 vote, fully funded by tariff. But that caused only some disapproving grumbles among the older families. What happened next nearly brought the building down. The following day, Wainwright stood once again in Emily's office, now with Lemuel Estermont beside him, while she raged at them both.
You planned this together, didn't you? Admit it!
Emily stabbed a ringed finger at them. We admit it, but it didn't, as you said, cost us our heads, so I hope you'll ratify it.
Lunacy! Votes for the Commons? In Parliament! Only 5 votes, protested Estermont. Hardly enough to pass laws on their own.
It's just a start, added Wainwright, but an important one. It sets a precedent. The working people of Dunwall, of all Bristol, now have representation in government. Just as soon as they elect someone, that is. Great, more rabble-rousers. And I can guess who they'll pick, can't I? My father's just going to love this. Emily turned a suspicious eye towards Estermont. What exactly possessed you to donate your family's votes to the people of Bristol?
Well, let's just call it a sudden flash of revolutionary zeal.
The details are between us, said Wainwright, but he's been well compensated. His family still holds considerable influence, which will come in handy as chairman of the new Workers' Council.
Along with a comfortable stipend that should keep my family solvent, at least.
So you sold your votes for money, Emily accused. Charming. Oh, I don't know, said Wainwright with a grin. Perhaps the Commons will elect him as their representative instead of me, and he'll get them back. After all, we are men of many talents.